We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Drew Allen Show. Pleasure to be here with you today, this morning for me and afternoon for Mr. Gingrich here. Now, look, I just want to say a couple of things. Some of you are new and haven't tuned into the show before. I've had the privilege of working as a publicist for a lot of well-known people in this movement, including Charlie Kirk, but Tulsi Gabbard, Peter Navarro, it's a long list. And Speaker Gingrich is somebody who I've admired for a long time. And I hate to date myself, but I was born in 1987. And I just want people to understand this from my perspective. Before you had Trump, before you had MAGA, before there was the Tea Party, you had Newt Gingrich, and he was one of the original disruptors in Washington, D.C. And I want you to think about this, because I'll get into this in a second, Mr. Speaker. Right now we're in a situation where we control narrowly, slimly, majorities in Congress. And it seems very difficult to get things done. But, we have the power. Trump is in the office. When Speaker Gingrich came in 1994 as Speaker, it was a hostile environment. You had Bill Clinton as president. And he was able to do things that I just still am in awe of. And, we won 54 Republican seats. That's how many we flipped. And, this is the first time we regained power in 40 years since the Eisenhower era, which is just incredible to think about. And I think, to me, it proved that the permanent ruling class wasn't untouchable. And so that's why I'm excited to have Mr. Speaker here with me to talk about this and give us some insight, because history did not begin today. And I think a lot of our problems are that we don't know that. We have no insider perspective about what's going on now, how bad things really are, et cetera. So my first question, Mr. Speaker, is, so you negotiated with Democrats in the 1990s. They opposed you fiercely. They despised you. But did you believe back then, did they fundamentally love America still? Was that your perspective?
Oh, I think most of them did. I think you've always had some people on the academic left who have been so alienated that they can't imagine. They assume the America you and I believe in is racist, sexist, evil, et cetera. You can go down the list. But they've always been a relatively small minority. What's made the difference, I think, in the last 20 years is the rise of really left-wing universities like Yale or Harvard, who now pump out, thousands of undergraduates who have been brainwashed into this kind of nonsense. And really, the vision of America that they're taught is an America that, frankly, you and I wouldn't love. Now, it happens to be a false vision, but I understand what's happened. And so we're going to have to wage a real fight over the next 10 or 20 years to reestablish, and I think the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is a good starting point. But we're going to have a real fight to reestablish that, on balance, this is the most open country in history. It has the greatest opportunity for everyday people. It has continually moved in the direction of more inclusiveness, more opportunities for everybody. And I think any other description is simply not accurate. And frankly, you look around the planet, there aren't almost no places that are competitive. I'm talking to you from Switzerland, where my wife Callista is the U.S. ambassador. And Switzerland has a very deep tradition of freedom. And you can find a few other places. But historically, for large parts of the world, people have not had freedom, and certainly not had the kind of freedom that we've had in the United States.
Yeah, and I was obviously, Charlie Kirk was assassinated not that long ago, and for me and a lot of people, obviously, he represented American exceptionalism, and he went out there and he was eager to debate, and that's what made him so unique. And a lot of people ask me, and they wonder, what do we do now? Where so many people are looking for some savior all the time, and I think that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it's a lot of people don't like to hear it, but the solution, there are plenty of problems. You addressed a number of them. This false reality that Democrats want to live in, that's not a true, real vision of America. But when you're looking for Superman, to me, it's in the mirror, and I think people have to get educated and informed about what you're talking about, because we have to articulate that to our neighbors and friends, do we not?
Sure, and I think you have to start with the founding document, which was, when it was adopted, the most radical statement of human rights ever written. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, the other side of that is, we then have an obligation as people who are born with an endowment to protect that endowment and to make it better, to improve it, to stand firm and defend it. And I think that's a key part of this, is that you got to get across to people that all of us as citizens, every one of us, has an obligation to strengthen, improve, and defend the country. It's not something, you don't have the luxury of sitting around and saying, gee, I hope the king does this. Because in our system, each of us individually is a stakeholder, and each of us has a responsibility for protecting and improving the United States.
I know that you have, kids and grandkids. I've got 2 young daughters. One's almost 3, and the other one just turned 1. And I've been speaking to more Republican groups out where I live in Northern California. And one of the things I've been saying since I had kids, and obviously it changes your life and perspective, is that, the way we look at our job as parents, because it never ends. It's exhausting, obviously, to be a parent because it never goes away. That's a permanent role. One of the problems I see in the country is that people view their responsibilities as citizens in 2-year, but typically 4-year election cycles. When you're an American citizen every single day, your duty to be a steward for what we've inherited, doesn't pause, and just show up once every 4 years. And I think that, to me, that's a perspective that people would benefit from.
Yeah, I think somehow we allowed it to be reduced to voting. If you show up once every 2 years or once every 4 years, you've done your job. That's not true. Citizenship is a 24-hour a day, 365-day-a-year process. You go back and you look at the founding fathers, it was amazing what they were prepared to do to create a country. And I think they would say to all of us, look, we have bequeathed to you this extraordinary, wealthiest country in history, enormously powerful, huge resources, great capabilities. Now you've got to get up and you got to do your share. And Reagan used to say that freedom is always one generation deep. And that's exactly right. And if you don't teach the next generation about freedom and how to be free and help them learn to be citizens, why would you expect them to somehow automatically sustain it? So I think what you're doing and what you're saying on the show is really, really important.
So if you're just joining me today, I'm live here with, Speaker Newt Gingrich, Speaker of the House, 2012 presidential candidate. He's chairman of Gingrich 360, which is a multimedia production and consulting company based in Arlington, Virginia. He's got a Substack that's amazing, gingrich360.net. Subscribe there. And he's got a great podcast. I've been privileged to have put some people on that podcast in my life here. It's called Newt's World. That's available anywhere you get podcasts. And I do want to mention your book because I've got a quote I'll bring up in just a second. But and this is his latest best-selling book, Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. I think you've written, I don't know, 44. Is that the total?
No,
Is it 45
something
now?
like that.
You trying to keep up with the number of the presidents
Yeah.
in the United States?
About 44.
Man, incredible stuff. So I just want to read a quote from this latest book, Trump's Triumph. So you write, President Trump rejected this system. And by that system, Mr. Gingrich is talking about the left-wing bureaucratic system from the start. Even as a candidate in 2015, early on, that'd be Trump, decisively decided with the legacies of Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan, and frankly myself, he's speaking of him, not me, of course. We were for fundamental change within the GOP and had taken on the Gerald Ford, Bush family, Mitt Romney, accommodationist wing of the Republican Party. President Trump's willingness to reject the old order led to the rise of the Never-Trumpers and the bitter anti-Trump wing of the GOP and Washington establishment, many of whom are no longer in office. There seems to be an internecine war in the Republican Party that was going on when you were, Speaker of the House. The establishment wanted Reagan gone. They couldn't wait for him to be gone. What's your perspective, I guess, on, the Republican Party and this constant battle we have between the establishment and, Newt Gingrich and the Tea Party and Trumpism. Why can't we get past this?
Well, I think we'll gradually get past it by the gradual defeat of the other side. Look, if you were a classic Republican, you belonged to a country club, you were pretty well off economically, you didn't appreciate or want to have much to do with working class Americans, and you believed in an international order in which you had ties to Great Britain, to some extent to France, and you saw yourself as this very sophisticated carrier of a particular way of doing things. Now you come along and you have Trump, and I would suggest that to some extent, this goes all the way back to Barry Goldwater and the book he wrote called Conscience of a Conservative, which was at the time an extraordinarily important book that really did outline it was in paperback, and it outlined in very simple, clear language an alternative to big government socialism. And Goldwater split the Republican Party because the traditional country club Republicans didn't want to have anything to do with all these ideas. So Reagan comes along as Goldwater is losing in 1964. The great achievement of his campaign is that in October, he asks Ronald Reagan to speak nationally. They raised $100,000, which back then was a huge amount off television. And Reagan gave a speech called A Time for Choosing, which is still on YouTube. And I recommend to everybody in our audience, if you want to get a sense of how long this has been going on, go back and listen to Ronald Reagan in October of 1964. So Reagan comes along and actually means what he says. I mean, he's a genuine conservative. He's not just saying it to get elected. And he gets to be governor and terrifies the establishment Eastern Country Club Republicans. There's a huge civil war between Reagan and Gerald Ford, Ford representing the old order. Reagan ultimately wins. And then I think in order to unify the party, he picks George H.W. Bush as vice president, but has not thought through the fact that George H.W. Bush is skull and bones at Yale. He is really from Connecticut. He is a moderate, a very smart guy, very, very courageous guy. Shot down in World War II as a pilot off of an aircraft carrier. I mean, and no disrespect to Bush as a person, but Bush was the old order. And in fact, George Shultz, the former Secretary of State, told me one time that every Reagan supporter in the government was fired by George H.W. Bush within 1 week after he took over. And it was clear that he learned nothing from Reagan. So you have a detour with Bush, he then gets defeated. And then we come along and we both win in 94 for the first time in 40 years, but equally important, or more important, we become the first re-elected House Republican majority since 1928. I mean, to give you a sense of the scale here, from 1930 to 1994, the Democrats controlled the House for 64 years, and we controlled it for 4.
Yeah.
After 1994, we have controlled the House for 22 years, and they've controlled it for 8. So you've had a fundamental shift in the balance of power in the U.S. House beginning in 94. And that was a shift that was a grassroots conservative reform party, not the old-time country club party. And then you had Trump come along, and Trump, I think, instinctively understood blue-collar workers. People forget, Trump was not a real estate guy in the sense of money. Trump actually built things. He actually worked with blue-collar workers. He was actually out there on the street talking with them. And as a result, Trump has, I think, a unique flair for communicating with average, everyday people in a way which dramatically broadened the Republican Party, but also scared probably 10% of it into leaving. These became the never-Trumpers. And if you look at where they were coming from and what they believed, you can be sympathetic to them that, in fact, Trump does represent a different world, and he's approaching it in a different way, and it has enormous power.
Yeah, yeah. One of the positive silver linings I see in this constant state of war the Republican Party has been in since, I was a kid and unaware of politics, is that at least we have these fights because it shows that there is a North Star. So we conservatives are always fighting to, reclaim the party or keep the party in the image that we desire, which is, based on the foundations of this country. But on the left, Mr. Speaker, it's scary to me because you don't have really anybody that is saying, hey, this is, no longer, the Democrat Party that I used to belong to. I mean, pick an issue, whether it's abortion, whether it's the transgender issue, whether it's, now the way they talk about the border. I mean, I just want to, I want to play this for the audience because I'm not going to play the whole clip, just to give you an idea. This is not long ago. This is 2014, Barack Obama. This is Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, all these Democrats. I want you to think about their open border policy and how they're attacking Trump. I just want you to listen to them not long ago in their own words.
If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half century.
I think we got to have tough conditions. Tell people to come out of the shadows. If they've committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked. They're gone.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers.
I mean, he sounds like Stephen Miller there to me. And so I guess my question is, what is going on here? I mean, the left has been completely consumed by this radical left now. We're at least continue to fight. And so I know I'm encouraged by that. At least we got people here that say, no, the Republican Party, we know what we're supposed to be and need to be. The Democrat Party doesn't seem to have any resistance to the party radically changing. I mean, do you recognize the Democrat Party today versus the one that, you were the Speaker of the House, in the mid 90s. What happened?
Well, that brought back some memories of sitting behind Bill when he would give the State of the Union. So I remember that when he came in and he said, the era of big government is over. We had to give him a standing applause. I mean, there I was. What am I going to do, right? So I'm standing right behind him and I'm giving him this round of applause. And I'm sure that all of my conservative friends are thinking, has Newt just lost his mind? But when the President of the United States gets up and says what you believe, it's kind of nice to reward him for it. I watched this coming. It's almost like watching a tide come in the ocean. And a lot of it goes back to having lost the battle for the universities, which goes back all the way to the Vietnam War era, when one of our great mistakes was to allow people going, for example, to seminary to be able to avoid being drafted. So you had the most anti-war people were driven to the college campuses to avoid the draft. And then they had to feel righteous about not going. And so they adopted positions. We tend to forget, by the way, the last great wave of left-wingism was actually in the period 1967 to 1971. And we had 2,500 bombings in the United States. We had people getting killed. We had a professor at the University of Wisconsin who was killed. We had a professor at Columbia whose entire life work was destroyed by a mob. We had bombers who didn't know what they were doing, who blew themselves up in New York City. And you had 1 million people gathering around the Pentagon. I mean, there was a period there where it felt like the country was coming apart. And then the Vietnam War ended, everything sort of calmed down. Reagan came along, and Reagan created a new consensus. And that consensus lasted, I would say, up until Obama. Clinton was a Arkansas politician who had dealt with a conservative state legislature, and who, while he went to Yale and he was a Rhodes Scholar in Britain, he had at least 1 foot firmly in the real world. Obama comes along, and Obama is really the beginning of the genuinely radical and uprooted American politician. I mean, nobody's really gone back, because I think we were all so glad to have an African-American president and to have broken through the racial barriers that people didn't want to look seriously at how radical he was. But Obama was very radical and very, frankly, very racist. And the people he appointed were far more radical than he was. And then, of course, Biden is essentially Obama's third term and has the same Obama people. So what you have emerging is government appointees who are very left-wing, universities that are even further to the left, and then starting with AOC and the squad, you have the rise of a relatively small number, but growing, of people who are literally living in an alternative universe. I mean, their vision of reality is so far apart from you and me that we're not in the same universe.
Yeah. So I want to read a quote. In 1994, you said, which I think is prescient still. You said, "On everything on which we can find agreement, I will cooperate. On those things at the core of our philosophy, there will be no compromise." I guess my question is, we're living in alternate realities. I've written some op-eds recently just talking about the fact that we're in a marriage with irreconcilable differences. I mean,
Right.
like, to your point,
Yeah.
one faction in this country hates the country. They genuinely want to destroy it because they don't believe it's worthy of preserving. And then you have people like me who understand real history and have perspective and love this country deeply. I mean, I lived in Italy when I was 23 for 2 years. I worked in Milan. I was legal, by the way. I was not illegal, but anyway, I was in Milan. So, my early experience was, that form of socialism and everything, despite the fact that I love Italy so much. But I guess, there's like nothing that it seems that we can agree on anymore. And, you're talking about the bombings and the violence, kind of in that period in the early 70s. And now I see, obviously, a lot of left-wing violence, whether it's targeting Trump or what happened with Charlie Kirk or, schools around the country and their manifestos, read like the curriculum that they've been fed. Audrey Hale, for example, in Nashville, in that Covenant shooting, her manifesto was, she was white, of course, but she said, I hate white people. Black people are really cool. I mean, this is the thinking. And I thought that after Charlie died, Mr. Gingrich, I thought that we'd have a national reckoning, like a conversation about the left's rhetoric, because to me, it started, I remember when Hillary Clinton, she went to, it was at a donor meeting in New York City, I believe, or New York State. And that's where the basket of deplorables comment came up. She said, half of Trump supporters, she basically consigned us to the basket of deplorables. And the rhetoric just seemed to change and get more. And I think it had to do, by the way, because what Obama did, and obviously when you get into the Hillary Clinton email scandal and what her organization did, when you get into the Trump-Russia collusion hoax and coup, I think that they just went so far in terms of just the moral depravity of abuse. It's almost like this desperation to stay in there, and stay ahead of I think real crimes that I think this Trump administration is currently looking into too. It feels like there was this perfect storm where they just felt like there was they had to win. They hated Trump. He was an outsider. And so they didn't impose any sort of restrictions on themselves. And we went quickly from deplorables to Nazis and fascists. And obviously it's having real world consequences that are spilling out in violence. And the left does not look in the mirror ever and say, hey, maybe we should turn the temperature down in the room, right? Maybe our rhetoric is a little too extreme.
Well, look, I think first of all, Hillary was always much more radical than Bill. Mm-hmm. And you have to start from there. I mean, she was the genuine liberal in the couple. And he was sort of a good old boy, Arkansas conservative. She wasn't. Not only was she from Chicago, but she had spent a lot of time with the most famous radical writer of his generation, who had written Rules for Radicals and Revelry for Radicals and what have you. And so she really had, by the time she was an undergraduate student, she was writing papers about these kind of radicals from a totally favorable standpoint. And I think that what happened was, and by the way, you see the same pattern with Obama. The people who raised Obama, the people who spent time with Obama, came out of the hardest left parts of American society. I mean, these were people who were methodically opposed to the United States and to what we stood for. And so I think that this network, which had started growing in the 20s and 30s on the academic side, and then with Soviet invention, it started growing in the 40s and 50s, and was a much deeper, bigger network of people who hated America. And of course, was an enormous effort made to discredit that, but it's historically true. And I think that's a key part of this. I always tell people that as a sense of the scale of change, that liberals, when it comes to the use of force, whether it's foreign policy or domestic, liberals are like people who saw The Lion King and thought it was a documentary. And they think that lions actually do sing and dance with zebras. And when you try to explain to them that in the real world, lions eat zebras, they'll tell you, no, didn't you see the movie? Don't you realize that they're really nice people? So they have no capacity for dealing with evil, whether it's Hamas or whether it is George Soros's views, or it is what you see happening with Putin, or frankly, drug dealers. I mean, you look at the number of young Americans killed by drugs and the degree to which we have failed to have an effective reaction. It's historians will look back a century from now and wonder how we tolerated it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've kept Mr. Gingrich longer than I told him to, but if you have a couple minutes, I've a couple more questions for you. And you know, you're busy. He's in the U.S. facility here in Switzerland, which is incredible.
Yeah.
As if you're just joining, his wife's currently the ambassador over there. So, um, uh, okay, when you were speaker, all right. It's unbelievable what you got done with the contract for America. I mean, truly. I mean, you know, yeah, you forced a shutdown, and you got Bill Clinton to bend the knee, and you got a lot of concessions, and it was an incredible thing. Why can't this? Why haven't future Congresses? Why can't this Congress? Why can't Republicans today, when we have the Oval Office, why can't they be? Why aren't they effective like you were? What's the problem?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd say in some ways they've been very effective. If you look at the big, beautiful bill, the Republican problem is not substance. The Republican problem is they are the dumbest, weakest communicators on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only two articulate Republican presidents in my lifetime are Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. They were both Democrats. They both actually worked in that business. And so I look at all that, and, you know, the example I'll give you is that the one big, beautiful bill by itself is going to revolutionize the American economy. It has a provision for building factories, which reduces the length of time it takes to write off the investment from 39 years to 1 year. Now, the impact that's going to have over the next 5 or 8 years is going to be phenomenal. And by the way, you're beginning to see it. You're beginning to see the manufacturing index go up very dramatically. They have a huge increase in tax returns, where the people are getting money back. I think over $100 billion surge in 1 year. So that we'll have the largest amount of refunds in American history this year. So there are a lot of things going on. You've had a revolution in access to energy. And you're going to see more stuff like this. Part of the problem is that you get to a key fight, you're going to have virtually everybody in the propaganda media on the side of the left. So they're going to totally distort what's going on. And then you're going to have, and there was a brilliant article written the other day about the fact that the left consistently lies about people who are victims. The case they were using was the guy in Minneapolis the other day, who, when you actually dug into his background, was clearly a hardened activist, anti-government person, but that wasn't the way the media wanted to portray it. So I think part of what you have to recognize is that we have to learn to communicate what we're doing. And then frankly, they need a bigger margin. I mean, when I was speaker, we were very lucky in that I had 236 members at one point. Well, at 236 members, you can maneuver and you can have 10 or 12 of them mad at you and you still win. Poor Mike Johnson, who has the hardest job in Washington, has a 1 vote margin right now. 1 vote. That means anybody who's sick, he lost the margin. Anybody who gets mad at him, he lost the margin. Anybody who wants to negotiate for one little goodie, he's lost the margin. I mean, Johnson does the most amazing job I've ever seen because he has 0 margin of error.
Yeah, one of the problems with the country, you've got people out there who just are perpetually in despair. You know, they can never celebrate anything that's happened, and obviously that's not a place that leads to results and success. And people don't understand the process. They think that Donald Trump was going to come in and within 1 year solve every problem that has accrued over the past, 4 decades or more, and that's just not the way it works. Well,
just one point though. Look at the border.
Yeah,
it was the most dramatic reduction of illegal immigration in American history. Boom, done.
Yeah.
And of course, that means people go, okay, yeah, but what are you doing for me now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
but that's the nature of the business. I mean, look, if you want to be in the game, so it's like McDonald's. You better be prepared to make some hamburgers if you're going to be selling hamburgers. Well,
yeah.
Donald Trump's got to come up with some new positive, and he is, and he will. I'm looking forward to the State of the Union to see what the next phase is.
Yeah. Are you optimistic for the midterms? Obviously, there's lots of doom and gloom out
I
there.
believe if the president engages, the Republicans will win the midterms. If the president does not engage, we will lose them. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to explain to people around me, look, like you better treat these midterms like you did the previous presidential election because Trump is on the ballot. Because if we don't win these midterms and hold the House and Senate, it's over. I mean, they will impeach.
That's right.
I mean, it'll be over.
That's right.
So, I think that's the deal. Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for being here and spending this much time. God bless you. And until next time.
Thanks. Talk to you again.
Thank you. Well, it's Newt Gingrich there for you. A great guy, sharp. I always, I remember when I was a young kid. One of my comments, even during the 2012 when he ran for president, I marvel. I thought he was always one of the greatest communicators out there, and he's right. I mean, you heard him mention that one of the biggest problems we have in this movement is we don't have people who are articulate on the issues, and I think a lot of that is, people go to Washington, D.C., and, it's a good old boys club, and obviously it's very left-leaning, and I think that just seeps into these Republicans that go in there, and they're just so timid. They live in this, hyperbolic chamber of liberal left-wing pressure, even though they've been elected as, Republicans, and they just don't have the cojones to stand there and speak honestly and truthfully. I got just a couple closing thoughts here for you. But first, what do 3 billionaires, 4 major banks, and a legendary 72-year-old investor all have in common? They're all making the same shocking prediction. Gold is headed for $10,000 or more. Goldman Sachs says gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan says 25%. And one respected economist now believes the U.S. government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. And the world's wealthiest players are already making their move. You can see exactly what they're seeing for free. Our friends at American Alternative Assets, they've got a powerful new report, The Surprising Case for $10,000 Gold. And you can go to cloutgold.com to download it for free. Call 855-803-GOLD. Again, it's cloutgold.com to download it free or call 855-803-GOLD. This breaks down the hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree. It's an educational tool. I got to tell you, you get on these shows, and whether it's being on this side interviewing or, the reversed side, time just goes by really, really fast. I mean, I could have talked to, Speaker Gingrich all day, I mean, he's got so much insight, but, you got to cut people loose. I asked him to be on for 25 and went for basically 35. So, I appreciate it. So, I mean, I hope that, obviously, Mr. Speaker's advice for, this administration is, it's got to be about Trump. I mean, that's the reality. If people have got to get, we got to make people enthusiastic. I mean, it's true. Basically, I talked for a long time on shows about the stakes of the 2024 presidential election. And they were grave, and we pulled it off and won. But the stakes in the midterms are identical, if not worse, because we've made so much progress. We haven't solved every problem in the world, but you heard Mr. Gingrich, Newt there, I mean, talking about the border. I mean, that's a significant thing. I mean, 66% of the people, support, deportation. And anyway, I mean, that was one of the big issues coming in, the open border, and he shut it down basically on day one, which is huge. But if we do lose the House and Senate, everything that we worked for to get to this point is over, and it's gonna be really, really, really ugly. Let me just say that. And by the way, I want to let you know again, you can get Newt's book. It's Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. That's the book cover there. And his Substack is gingrich360.net. And his podcast is Newt's World. If you haven't checked it out, I watched the. I didn't actually watch the Grammys. I'm just going to end talking about something else. Did anybody out there tune into the Grammys? I did not, but I saw some clips, and obviously you had Bad Bunny from Puerto Rico up there, and he had to, make anti-ICE statements. You realize how coordinated all this crap is. I just read too that in Minneapolis, I think it was $250 million, if I'm not mistaken. I think I saw Laura Ingraham talking about it. Was spent by various nefarious groups funding these protests. Nothing is organic with the left. It's all organized chaos. And you see it at the Grammys, that revered cultural institution, the Grammys, which was more like, Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, I just don't know what people are thinking. I used to not think so much about some of the outfits, and you had I don't even know how to pronounce her name. I've heard her song. I know who she is. Chappelle Rion, whatever her name is. And she's I don't know. I mean, these are family shows. They're supposed to be. And these people, it's just like, oh man, it just grosses me out. And with all the Epstein stuff out there, and there's plenty of terrible stuff in it, and there's also many conspiracy theories floating that maybe some of them will be true as well. But you just look at that event, and you can imagine those things happening with those people that are just so deranged. But Justin Bieber, all of them participating in the ice out stuff with the pins and everything else, and I just laugh at these people. I mean, these people think that they're representing the majority. 2/3 of Americans, which includes Democrats and independents, are opposed to obviously illegal immigration. They support deportations. That was what Trump ran on. But these people live insulated in their bubble, and they just go out there and just make complete fools of themselves. But, if we lived in a proper country that could agree on one fact, which is America is the greatest country in the history of mankind, Bad Bunny would be disinvited from the Super Bowl. But I saw what's the quarterback's name? Whatever, going to the Super Bowl. He was asked about, oh man, I love Bad Bunny. And look, I'm not attacking the kid. I don't know anything about him. I mean, most of these quarterbacks seem like pretty decent, nice guys. But he's asked about Bad. Oh yeah, I love his music, Bad Bunny. It's just, it's just the pressure campaign. Even if we are the majority in the media, even in the NFL, from the top, you've got so much pressure to toe the left-wing line. And it's crazy because the majority of people who watch, the Super Bowl, I mean, this is your flyover country. These are Trump supporters. And, we exist too, but all these people do is like alienate us. And it's frustrating, but I mean, Bad Bunny, I didn't get into it at first. I said, I don't care. I'm over it. It's a Super Bowl halftime show. But we see how political he is at the Grammys, how ungrateful he is. And we're going to reward this guy by giving him the biggest platform of the year to go and perform at how many other people could be performing at the at the Super Bowl halftime show? And I know TPUSA is doing their own thing. They made some announcements the other day. I didn't hear it, but it's just, these institutions are so easily captured. And anyway, most of us, of course, have greater cojones than any of these people that are multi-millionaires, running the NFL, et cetera. But anyway, look, I hope you found the interview with Newt Gingrich enlightening. He's just a wealth of information. He's got an unbelievable brain. I'm envious of it sometimes. But anyway, thank you for being here today. I got to go get my kids out of bed. God bless you all. And until next time.
In a nation divided, in a time of shadows, and rises a call that echoes through every valley, every church, every heart that still believes in truth. For Christ and Country tells the powerful story of conviction, courage, and unwavering faith in the face of opposition. It is the story of a man who refused to bow. In these pages, you'll witness a modern struggle for truth, a stand not just for one man, but for every American who believes that faith still matters. From author Drew Thomas Allen comes a stirring tribute to courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable hope found in Christ. This is the time. This is the fight. This is the story of a nation worth saving, for Christ and for country.
Fast forward to Muhammad. He's getting private information from a supposed angel. He said it, and then someone else memorized it, and then we have to trust their memory and their writing that they got what Muhammad said right, and that Muhammad got what... Why would we believe that? That doesn't make any sense. On the flip side, you don't have in the Quran what we have in the Bible, the manifold evidence, the eyewitness testimonies, the writing of it during the time of the eyewitnesses, and the evidence provided, and the people dying for what they believe that could have recanted. All that kind of stuff is absent from the Quran. Islam versus the Bible. Is it even possible that Islam is true and that the Bible has been perverted by the people of the book over time, and that it was Muhammad who brought back the real truth as delivered to him by the angel Gabriel? Are these things that are possible? Is there a world in which we as Christians are wrong and Muslims are right? I think these are good questions to ask. And also, if we are right, how can we show Muslims that they're incorrect about this? How can we show them that it is logically impossible for what they believe to be actually true? Logically impossible. Even, we're not saying like, oh, that's miracles or whatever. We're saying it logically cannot be that this is true. I'm going to make that argument today. I'm going to give you a few claims of the Muslim faith, and I'm going to say, here's why we know for a fact those claims cannot be true. They just can't. It can't be that Islam is true. It's not possible. We're going through in just the last several episodes this objections that have been raised by people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and people against Israel, saying, oh, Islam isn't that much of a threat. Israel's the real threat. We've talked about that. We're going to actually do Christian Zionism as compared to the Bible. We're going to do some other things as well. There's other episodes coming out on this. But our last episode, we played several clips from Raymond Ibrahim, who made the claim that the history of the Muslim faith has always been violent, and he just walked through all of that. And so we talked about the sort of historical view of Islam. Now I want to talk about the biblical view. Like, theologically, does Islam work? Could it be that Islam could maybe be true? Is there any way that it could possibly be true, Islam? And some people have said, look, Islam believes in the same God as we do. And others say, no, they don't believe in the same God because they don't believe in a Trinity and all this stuff. And I think that's a little bit of a distraction when we're talking about this subject. I don't think we need to be talking about whether or not they believe in the same God. It's like talking, it's very, very similar. I find this subject to be very similar to talking with Mormons about Jesus and God. Yes, it's true. They don't believe that the God of the Bible is what he is. As a Christian, what I say what I believe he is, very clearly, a Trinity and all of those things. But they claim to believe in the God of the Bible. That's the point. And Islam does claim to believe in the God of the Bible. That is the claim of Islam, even though I think they have twisted and perverted it so much that it's not even the same God. But they do make that claim. That is essential to the claim. So what we're going to do today is take the claims of Islam and say, how does that fit with the Bible? This is going to be a real interesting one, and I think it's a good episode because it's not so much about a news story that just came out. It's sort of flowing from all the news stories that have been coming out recently and saying, okay, let's dig deeper onto this subject. So let me just give you an overview. And if you're not familiar with Islam at all, I'll give you just sort of the, 1,000 foot up, 5,000 foot up sort of view of the faith. Islam began in the 600s AD. This is when Muhammad was around, and apparently Muhammad, and some would say Muhammad didn't exist. I don't think that needs to be the main argument. The point is that Muhammad, whatever he was, or whoever he was, or wherever he was, they claim that he was around in the early 600s AD. So this is 600 years. He died about 600 years after Jesus died. So this is into the Holy Roman Empire and all that kind of stuff. And this is quite a while after the time the Bible was written. Now Muhammad claimed was not literate. He could not read or write. So the claim is that he received revelation from the angel Gabriel. The angel Gabriel comes to Muhammad and says to him and gives to him all kinds of information. And Muhammad goes around apparently teaching people the things that he learned from the angel Gabriel, and then people are memorizing the things that he said. They're called the memorizers. They're memorizing it. Some of them are written down and all of this. And then when Muhammad dies, the first successor to Muhammad compiles all of the writings. There was an attack. A lot of them were destroyed. A lot of the memorizers were killed. I'm trying not to get too in the weeds here, but it was compiled, and that's where the Quran comes out of this. It comes out of what was compiled, what was able to be saved from the memorizers who had been memorizing the things that Muhammad allegedly said to them. So none of the Quran was written by Muhammad. It just claims to be the things that Muhammad said, as recorded by people who memorized it and then wrote it down later. And then, though many of those were destroyed, some of them were apparently saved, and there we go. Okay, so that's what you have when you have the Quran. You have nothing written by Muhammad or nothing written by an angel, just people who supposedly memorized what Muhammad said, supposedly from an angel. And this corrects the Christian teaching. So Muhammad is in a time when Christianity is all around him, right? He lives in a time in the world where, it doesn't matter where you go, the Christianity is very, very present. And there's not really a large force opposing Christianity. I mean, there are pagans around the world, but there's not a giant force like a nation that's opposing the Roman Empire and the Christianity that's being spread through the Roman Empire. So in his time, he believes the Christianity to be incorrect, but there's no force against Christianity. And out of Muhammad's revelation that he claims is going to come the force that opposes Christianity, the Muslims and their armies and so on and so forth. So the point is that what he believes about Christianity and what is stated in the Quran about Christianity is essentially that Christianity is it's perverted the truth of God. Like God gave original revelations, that's true. And I think if I'm understanding it correctly, they would most Muslims would generally, or the teachers would generally consider the Bible to have had a authentic source. The books of the Bible have authentic sources from God or from Allah, they would say. But they would say that the books, what's in the Bible today, you can't trust because it's been perverted by the people of the book, or the Christians. That's what they call the Christians. And so the people of the book perverted it, and Muhammad came to sort of fix that. What he believes about Jesus, what the Muslim faith believes about Jesus, is that he was a prophet, but not that he died. He did not die. His body was switched out on the cross, and he was replaced by a double. And so Jesus never died, and that's why they were able to pass around the story that he rose again. He actually never died. He did ascend into heaven, they believe. And they do believe that Jesus, he did many miracles, he was a great prophet, ascended into heaven. There was a fake death and resurrection. And then they do believe that Jesus will come back. Jesus, they do believe Jesus will come back, like Christians do. I mean, Jews don't believe that. Christians believe that. They believe that Jesus will come back, and that Jesus, when he comes back, he'll defeat a sort of antichrist-like figure, which is interesting because that's Christian theology, right? I mean, that's not like a new religion. That's like Christian religion, only you just changed it a little bit. Which is why I compare them to the Mormons. I think the comparison between Islam and the Mormon faith is remarkable, at least at its origin and at its similarity to Christianity and Judaism. So they believe that the Old Testament, again, they believe the books have been perverted, but they do believe the general concepts of the Old Testament, that God gave the land of Canaan to Israel, and that was their place, and to Ishmael he gave Arabia and all this stuff. But they also believe that Abraham, after Ishmael was sort of cast away from the family, because Isaac was there and there were problems between Ishmael and Isaac, that Abraham went to visit Ishmael as an older child or a young man, and with him, Abraham and Ishmael either built or purified or sanctified the rock in Mecca, where the Kaaba in Mecca. So again, I might not be getting all the details right. If you're in Islam, you might say, well, technically I believe this, and I'm trying to say this in a very general sense, so that different sects of Muslims and different kinds of Islamists would all generally agree with the general statements that I'm saying. That's kind of what I'm trying to go for, that I can kind of summarize the entire different views among the scholars of the Muslim faith. Okay, so the question then for today is this possible? Is it possible? Like, why should we just say no, that the angel Gabriel couldn't have come to somebody and say, hey, listen, the Christians have perverted my word and I need you to fix it? Is that possible? Is there a world in which the angel Gabriel could do that? You see, because a lot of people think that we believe what we believe as Christians. We believe what we believe because we just believe it. We just we're told to believe it, and so we believe it, and by faith we just believe it. It's a blind faith. If that's true, then what's wrong with having blind faith in Muhammad? What's wrong with taking that same kind of principle, just believe it, and apply it to the angel Gabriel coming again? If the angel Gabriel's come in the past, why couldn't he come again and say, hey, look, you guys perverted the scriptures? Okay, here's the reason why. First, because it's logically inconsistent what the Muslims believe, and I want to try to make an argument for that. And two, because it actually has no evidential basis. And we, as Christians, are not called to believe things without evidence. And I want to make a case for that as well. So let me make the case for both of those things, that what the Muslims believe is logically inconsistent with just reality. It's not like saying, oh, well, the resurrection is inconsistent with reality. No, that's a miracle. Like, we believe that if there's a creator God who created the universe, there certainly is, that God certainly would have the power to resurrect a person, right? So that's not logically inconsistent. Logically inconsistent would be saying there's such a thing as a square circle. It just couldn't be. That's just not possibly logically consistent. That's what I'm saying that Islam is, and let me try to make a case for that. I know I've been sort of building up to this for too long, so let's just jump right in. Okay, first, now Muhammad descended from Ishmael. That's biblically based, as far as that's probably a true thing. If Muhammad was real, and I think he probably was, or at least there was a person named Muhammad, all the claims about him say that he was a descendant of Ishmael, which was a son of Abraham. And so he was the first son of Abraham, but he was cast out not to receive the inheritance of the land of Canaan that was given to Isaac. but Ishmael was the first son born from Abraham and Hagar, not Abraham and Sarah. So that's true. That's probably true that Muhammad was an Ishmaelite. He's from Arabia, as far as we know, or at least that's the claim about him. Okay, so Abraham helped Ishmael build or purify or sanctify the Kaaba in Mecca. That seems like a really unlikely thing, because what the Muslims will admit from the book of Genesis about the life of Abraham doesn't leave a whole lot of time for him to go to Arabia. I suppose it's possible. There's just no good reason to think that he went to Arabia. You say, well, there's no good reason to think that he did anything. Yeah, but think about this for a second. When Moses was writing the book of Genesis, he was writing it from the top of Mount Sinai with smoke and fire and lightning and audible voice of God and miracles like crossing the Red Sea and water from a rock and all of this stuff. And then he comes down and gives this book of Genesis to the people. And the people say, yeah, I think that's true, because I'm looking around and I'm seeing all of these miracles. I think you're probably writing something from God. And not only that, he also writes the book of Exodus while he's up there that says, you guys are watching me do all these miracles, and they get it and they believe it. The fact that the Jewish people believed the writing of Moses meant that he really was doing miracles, or else they'd be saying, what are you talking about, water from a rock? That never happened. You are making this up, Moses, and they wouldn't have followed him. Okay, so when he comes down and brings the book of Exodus and gives it to the people see it and say, yeah, that definitely happened. That means it definitely happened because they're the eyewitnesses of it happening. The fact that we have the book of Exodus today, that it was copied and written down, means they actually did see it, because it was written by a person who was there and written to the eyewitnesses of his claims. Right? So the book of Exodus proves that Moses was doing miracles when he was writing these books, okay? And he was associated with the obvious revelation of God. And then he wrote the book of Genesis, right? So the book of Genesis, while he's in the mountain, all the miracles, provides us evidence to believe that it's a true account, okay? Now, fast forward to Muhammad. He's living 4,500 years or so after the time of Abraham and Ishmael. Is Muhammad doing miracles when he's writing down the Quran and writing down that Abraham went to Mecca? No. He's getting private information from a supposed angel, and he's not even doing any miracles to prove that he's telling the truth. It's certainly not on the scale of Moses, and Moses was only about 500 years after the time of Abraham. And so you've got this huge 4,000 extra years between the two. You have Muhammad, who has no personal knowledge of any of these things. He wasn't an eyewitness or anything. At least Moses would have had some information handed down from generations. Only 500 years, you could see that, but 4,500 years, and not even directly. There's no direct connection there, even orally, let alone from an angel. How do we know that it's an angel? Because why? You're getting this private information from an angel. And by the way, Muhammad didn't even write it down. He said it, and then someone else memorized it, and then we have to trust their memory and their writing that they got what Muhammad said right, and that Muhammad got what. You see that there's no evidential miracles to prove these things. And it's so far after the thing that happened, you would require miracles, right? So Moses can write about things that happened before his time because he's doing miracles to prove that what he's writing is from God. But otherwise, we would want Moses to be writing about the things he saw, eyewitness accounts, like Matthew, who wrote about the things he saw, or John, who wrote about the things he saw, Luke, who wrote about the things the apostles saw. He's collecting eyewitness testimony. When Moses is writing the book of Genesis, he's able to do that, write about things that happened before, and we could accept it as true because he's doing miracles to prove he knows that he's actually getting it from God. There's undeniable miracles that he's doing. This is not happening for Muhammad. So then to switch up and say, well, Abraham went to Mecca, why would we believe that? There's no good reason to believe that. And I'm going to show you that this is logically inconsistent. So let's go to the next claim. The next claim that Jesus didn't die on the cross, a substitute, sort of a body double, died in his place. This is just logically inconsistent. This is where you have the logical impossibility of the beliefs of Islam, which I'm not really sure why this is important to them. I suppose because if Jesus died and rose from the dead, that kind of reinforces the idea that he's God or something. If I was a Muslim, I would say, man, I don't know why we make such a big deal about Jesus not being the one who died and rose from the dead. I don't know why we make such a big deal about that, because it seems to me that most of the other things you believe could still fit with that. But they do believe that. They make a big deal about it. And so, look, this is logically inconsistent, okay? It's really kind of insane, actually. Think about it, okay? Think about it from the perspective of a historian, right? The disciples were the ones who wrote down the Gospels. So the fact that anybody was crucified, you only know because of the disciples. And the disciples were the ones who wrote that Jesus was crucified. Okay, the disciples believed that Jesus had been dead and rose from the dead. We know that they believed that, right? They wrote about how they thought he was dead. They went to the tomb. They even, the text where we learn that Christ died is the one where we learned that it was actually him who died. Like, in the book of John, John is saying, I'm at the foot of the cross and I'm looking up at Jesus, and Jesus is telling me to take care of his mother. I mean, this is the text that you're saying. You don't even know anything about Jesus except from these texts. And you're saying that these texts are right where I want them to be right and are wrong where I want them to be wrong. But that's like logically inconsistent, because here's the reason. Number one, the Romans weren't that stupid, okay? The Romans knew how to identify a person. I mean, this had to be a perfect double of Jesus. And it had to be a really well thought out scheme and plan to fool the Romans into crucifying the wrong guy, to fool the Pharisees who had spent lots of time with Jesus and arguing and debating with him. And now you're going to fool them into thinking that guy is Jesus, not this one. No way is that going to happen. No way. But not only that, that's just an unlikelihood. It's logically inconsistent because we know that the apostles were writing true things when they were writing it down, when they were writing down the story of the resurrection. We know that because they would never write it like that if they were lying. They would never lie and say that women were the first people to find the tomb empty, because women weren't considered credible eyewitnesses in their time. In the first century, you wouldn't lie like that. You would make up a lie. If you're making up a lie, you'd say, well, the men were the first ones to find the tomb. There's no way they were lying about that. The apostles would have, if the apostles put out a double and then Jesus never died, they'd know, but they weren't lying when they said the women went to the tomb and found it empty. Okay? And then you have things like other things they wouldn't lie about, like Peter denying Jesus and all the other apostles leaving him on the cross and abandoning him, and all of this stuff. There's no way the apostles would lie about it. Why would they want to make up lies that make them look bad? That doesn't make any sense. It's logically inconsistent. And then you also have the fact that all of the apostles, with maybe a couple exceptions, like John, who they tried to put him to death and he didn't actually die, and maybe a few others that we don't know for sure if they were put to death, but almost all the apostles, if not all of them, and certainly a large number of Christians who were eyewitnesses of the resurrection, of the resurrected Jesus, were all put to death for their belief in Jesus. They could have gotten out of death, they could have escaped being put to death if they had just recanted, and they wouldn't do that. Why? I mean, if Jesus was alive the whole time and he didn't die and rise from the dead, then all they had to do was say that, and they'd get out. They believed it. They gained no power. They gained no money. They actually lost a lot of friends and family and money and all kinds of things for this claim, and they ended up losing their lives. They had no incentive to lie, and yet you're telling me they lied? That makes zero sense historically. It's logically inconsistent. And not only did they lie, but they only lied about the part that you don't want to believe. That doesn't make any sense. On the flip side, you don't have Muhammad writing in the same style. He didn't write at all. But you don't have in the Quran what we have in the Bible, the manifold evidence, the eyewitness testimonies, the writing of it during the time of the eyewitnesses, and the evidence provided, and the people dying for what they believe that could have recanted. All that kind of stuff is absent from the Quran, that kind of evidence. And yet we're going to believe the Quran to correct the Bible. But here's what the Muslims will say. Hang on. But the book of, you say that it's all in the same text, that all this information is, that Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead is in the same text where we learn about Jesus. But it wasn't originally. Originally, it didn't say that, and the Christians added Jesus dying and rising from the dead to the text. It was perverted. We know that that's not true. First of all, because why would you even have Christianity? Christianity wouldn't exist if Jesus was just a good prophet who never died and rose from the dead. It wouldn't exist, right? It would just be a sect of Jews. I mean, it'd be a sect of Judaism. It became Christianity because Jesus died on the cross, rose from the dead, and then the Jews persecuted the Christians, and so they ended up becoming separate from the Jews and spreading through all the world. Otherwise, it would have just been a sect of Christianity. It wouldn't even exist if that were the case. But not only that, we actually have ancient copies. I mean, here's Muhammad in the 600s AD, and we have copies of the book of John, little fragments of the book of John that go all the way back to right after John died in the early 100s AD. Oh, in the 2nd century, 110, 115, that kind of thing. I think it's P52. We have fragments of these books of the gospel, and actually whole copies by the end of the 2nd and 3rd centuries. We have massive number of really early evidence that shows us what was written at the beginning, not what was written in the 600s. And by the way, guess what? It teaches the exact same thing, that Jesus died and rose from the dead. All of these things are consistent all the way through. We can prove Christianity, and you actually, by proving Christianity, end up proving the opposite, doing the negative towards Islam. It's actually proven to be false. Let me give you just one more thing. Okay, let me talk about faith and evidence, because this is very important. Okay, Muhammad supposedly got this information by private revelation from an angel 600 years after the time of Jesus and 4,500 years after the time of Abraham. And it was passed down orally until it was written down by memorizers and then compiled by the caliphs. All right. Let me just give you a couple scriptures as we close here. I'll start with Galatians. Galatians 1 and verse 8 says this: "But though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached, let him be accursed." Paul says, listen, if someone comes and preaches something different than what we've already preached, the apostles have already, the eyewitnesses have already given it out, then you need to let him be accursed, even if it's an angel from heaven. Why? Well, because the devil likes to appear like an angel. I mean, that's really helpful for him. In Deuteronomy 18, the verse is verse 22, where God says, "When a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord hath not spoken." Meaning, you need to test people who say they get prophecy and see if it's true. It just because someone says, "I got revelation from an angel," doesn't mean that it's true. In Deuteronomy 13, there's another statement. "If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer or a dream of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto thee, saying, Let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them. Thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams." The point is that God has always required that we be evidential in our view of prophecy and revelation from God. We don't just accept it because someone says, "I heard from an angel." This has always been the standard of God. You don't just accept things because you heard him. You might say, well, what about Hebrews chapter 11, which says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen? All we have to do is believe. Hebrews 2 says this: Therefore, if we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them slip. For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received the just recompense of reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord, and was confirmed unto us that by them that heard him, God also bearing them witness, both with signs and wonders, and with diverse miracles and gifts of the Holy Ghost, according to his own will. Essentially, the author of Hebrews here is answering the question, why should we listen to Jesus? And why should we follow the teaching of the apostles? And he says, because we have evidence. God has borne witness to the people who were eyewitnesses of Jesus' ministry, and he's given them the ability to do miracles so that you know what they're writing down is true. There is evidence that is required, and Hebrews 11 is actually saying that. Faith is the substance, Hebrews 11 says, of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. Why? Look, if you watched the faith of the elders and what happened to them, and Hebrews 11 goes on to talk about what happened to those who had faith in God, then you'd see that their faith was correct. Therefore, their faith is evidence to us that we should have faith. That's all faith is the evidence means. It means looking at the faith of others and how God blessed that and how that turned out to be true is good reason for you to have faith. The point is that our faith should not be without reason. We don't believe things because we're told to believe them, or because our parents believe them, or because some preacher told me to believe them. We should believe them on the basis of evidence. Otherwise, you become Mormon. Otherwise, you become Muslim. Otherwise, you become whatever. Christianity is a faith that is built on logical consistency and evidence. And that is what we believe. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Point of View Scriptura.
In a nation divided, in a time of shadows, and rises a call that echoes through every valley, every church, every heart that still believes in truth. For Christ and Country tells the powerful story of conviction, courage, and unwavering faith in the face of opposition. It is the story of a man who refused to bow. In these pages, you'll witness a modern struggle for truth, a stand not just for one man, but for every American who believes that faith still matters. From author Drew Thomas Allen comes a stirring tribute to courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable hope found in Christ. This is the time. This is the fight. This is the story of a nation worth saving, for Christ and for country.
Oh boy, where do I even start with this Super Bowl halftime show? And the mudslinging from the left that's saying that, we are political and et cetera. There's just so much to weigh in here. I mean, this Super Bowl stuff, it just highlights the entire problem in the country. And it points right back at the left. I want to read a list here of names. These are past Super Bowl halftime show headliners, starting with this one, Degenerate Rodent, Bad Bunny, Kendrick Lamar, Usher, Rihanna, Dr. Dre, The Weeknd, Shakira and J-Lo, Maroon 5 with Big Boy and Travis Scott, Justin Timberlake, Lady Gaga. That takes us back to 2017. What do all of these have in common? What do they have in common? They're all left-wing activists. They're all left-wing activists, and in most cases, their music is not family-friendly. And I'll weigh into the politics of this in just a second. because there's a lot to get into, a lot that needs to be addressed. But my first problem with the degenerate rodent, Bad Bunny, is that he's a degenerate rodent. It isn't even about politics at the top of the list. It's the fact that the Super Bowl is the most widely watched event in America every year. And it's a family-friendly event. At least that's what it's supposed to be. It's a football game. People have Super Bowl parties. They've got kids. People are tuned in. And you would think that, knowing that, a culture that cared about its kids would try to produce something wholesome, something unifying. And if you're some degenerate leftist out there that's upset with this message already, well, get ready, buckle up. Because I want you to defend this. Go ahead and defend this. So first off, the degenerate rodent Bad Bunny started the halftime performance with the song Titi Me Pregunto. And forgive me, I speak Italian, fluent Italian. I never cared that much for Spanish. Nothing against Spanish, but I never liked Spanish, so I learned Italian. I lived in Italy. I worked in Italy. I love Italian, so that's my language, not Spanish. I'm bilingual, but I don't speak Spanish. I speak Italian. So this first song, Titi Me Pregunto, is built around a brag of sexual conquering. And this is celebrated. I've got one today, another tomorrow. There's no wedding, Bad Bunny says. She says, my DICK is fire. I don't fall in love. I just use them. And in that song, of course, Bad Bunny lists by name and nationality a bunch of women like they're collectibles. I'm going to break your heart, he says proudly in the song. Now, that's just the first song. What other songs did he sing? Yo Perreo Sola. She gets high, she drinks, she gets horny, she climbs on the table and starts grinding. She doesn't want love, she wants stuff. You know what? Here's the other song he sang, Safira. If she bends over, I'm hitting it. Open your legs, don't be shy. This is for getting effed up and effing. Oh, it just keeps going. Pure pornographic club language. Ayo, ayo, he says over and over again, like a idiot. I go down on her and she gets happy. She wants it raw, no rules. We don't sleep. Here's another one. Monaco. The flight attendant goes down on you in the sky. Here's another one. El Apagón. I love Puerto Rico's let's see. Now, it's interesting because, the left tried to crucify Donald Trump back in 2016 when they had their November surprise with that decade-old grab him by the Access Hollywood tape. And here you've got a Puerto Rican singer that's glorifying this at the Super Bowl half. And this is why I don't even take the left seriously. You don't set the terms of my debate. You aren't any kind of moral authority. And that's why I laugh at you. That's why your attacks and on Trump and everything else, they don't work because you celebrate this stuff. You celebrate this stuff. And so that's the first reason, which isn't political at all, that I'm disgusted by this halftime show. I've got two daughters, by the way. I've got an almost 3-year-old and another daughter who just turned 1. So that means I'm a father, a girl dad currently. And, maybe I was selfish in the past before I had kids and would just, oh, it was such a good show. It was fun. Besides, it was in Spanish. I couldn't understand that he was saying these things anyway. It was so fun, wasn't it? You know, becoming a parent obviously changes you. You have a responsibility. And really, this is the big highlight of the Bad Bunny stuff. We are a culture in America that celebrates selfishness. It's all about me, 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 and what I want and my fun, and nothing can get in the way of that. Not even a bunch of kids watching the Super Bowl halftime show. You know, if we were a responsible, moral society that took our children seriously and loved our children and loved our youth, every American would say, you know, this is not what we want to showcase. If you're a parent and an adult and you want to go to a concert and listen to Bad Bunny, that's fine. That's fine. But it's the same thing with this, and you can relate it to Drag Story Hour for kids and the parades in West Hollywood, California, of men spanking each other and whipping each other in public. We do not care about our kids. We do not protect the youth. We are not invested in the future, which is our children. And that's number one. And then, yeah, it does get political because you'll notice that you have to be a left-wing activist to get a spot chosen by Jay-Z. He's the one who has been managing the Super Bowl halftime show since, I think, 2017. And so he picks these people. And so this is on Jay-Z, and I'm talking to you, Jay-Z. You're a degenerate. You should be ashamed of yourself that this is what you showcase at the Super Bowl year after year. You know, Morgan Wallen, country singer, artist, he could have put on an amazing halftime show. Jelly Roll, Post Malone. There are others out there as well. Plenty of people that we could celebrate and people would have had a fun time listening to. But instead, they put up this guy. And by the way, this was a political act. They knew what they were doing when they did this, just like they know what they're doing every single year. Despite the fact that a majority of people watching the Super Bowl are right-leaning, they would never, ever put somebody up there that was pro-Trump. Degenerate rat, Bad Bunny, just was accepting a Grammy Award and came out with this political message opposing ICE. Now imagine if, you can't even imagine. That's how far we are. You can't even imagine putting up somebody who said anything positive about Trump on that stage. And that's what's so infuriating by this. But again, it's the lyrics and it's what we're celebrating. I don't celebrate that. I reject it. And every single Democrat out there, I'm sorry, you are a supporter of degeneracy. If you think this Bad Bunny halftime show was amazing, because it wasn't amazing for my kids. I had older kids in my house. We hosted a Super Bowl party. You know, there were kids of various ages there, none of them teenagers yet. And this is what was on. And, look, they're celebrating this. This was the most watched Super Bowl or halftime show in history. Okay, fine. This is the first time we had an alternative halftime show with TPUSA as well. And that got a record-breaking number of views. And that was a success as well. And so, yeah, this nation continues to be deeply polarized. But, we can't seem to agree on anything. And that's the point. And in this case, it's the left who's at fault. It's Democrats who are at fault. Because again, my message is not political. I've got young girls, and I don't want to be watching a Super Bowl and have some guy singing in Spanish or English or any language about this sort of degeneracy. It has no place in my living room at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in California where I live. It was a crappy Super Bowl game, by the way, anyway. It was so boring. Totally boring football game. But let me play some clips here because I just want to talk about how stupid all of this is. Before I play a clip, though, I want to bring up your media here. I want to show you the difference of how they covered Bad Bunny and how they covered the TPUSA show with Kid Rock. And by the way, people's big comeback when I talk about the degeneracy on display at the Super Bowl with Bad Bunny and the lyrics I just read to you. Well, Kid Rock, he has a song, about sleeping with underage girls. Was that sung at that Super Bowl halftime show? Was that sung at the TPUSA show? No, it wasn't. Actually, let me do this. Let me play this. Here's Kid Rock at the TPUSA alternate halftime show.
There's a book that's sitting in your house somewhere that could use some dusting off. There's a man who died for all our sins, hanging from the cross. You can give your life to Jesus, and he'll give you a second chance till you can't take it. If you got a chance, take it.
Amazing. It's amazing. And the fact, look, and the argument isn't here that Kid Rock's lived a wholesome life and is, the example that I point my daughters to for some future husband. That's not the argument. It's about what's being showcased in a setting that is family oriented. That's it. So these are fake straw man arguments when you're saying, well, he's got songs about this. That's not what happened last night. We're talking about the Super Bowl, family friendly setting. And I played you there a clip of one of the songs he sang at the TPUSA event. Now look at some of these headlines. Here's Rolling Stone. Bad Bunny makes history as the first Latin artist to deliver a Super Bowl halftime show, primarily in Spanish, and he went all out. Glowing praise. Now let's see what Vanity Fair. Turning Point USA's All-American halftime show is predictably xenophobic, but perhaps surprisingly low quality and poorly attended. Here's Rolling Stone covering the TPUSA halftime show. Billed as an alternative to Bad Bunny's official Super Bowl performance, Turning Point USA's halftime show featured a half-assed, lip-sync filled set from Kid Rock. Vanity Fair. You didn't need to know Spanish to grasp the message of Bad Bunny's halftime show. Puerto Rico is America. Fiesta is a form of protest. Joy is a kind of rebellion. Communist crap. Here's ABC News. Bad Bunny delivered a standout performance at the halftime show on Sunday, paying homage to his Latin heritage and roots. The Grammy-winning global sensation brought his Puerto Rican culture to Levi State. Puerto Rican culture. And look, they use the song, starting with Titi Me Pregunta. So are you telling me that it's Puerto Rican culture to go and bang a bunch of hoes and celebrate them and brag that you're not going to marry any of them because you're not that kind of guy? That's Puerto Rican culture? Some kind of culture. So I've got one comment here I want to address from David Hogue. He's watching on Facebook. He says, the message in Bad Bunny's show was love overcomes hate. Really? I've got one today, another tomorrow. There's no wedding. She says my is fire. I don't fall in love. I just use them. She doesn't want love. She wants to. Well, I mean, he says in his song, he's not talking about love. He's just talking about effing. Wow, that's quite a message of love. Love conquers hate. Bad Bunny's got a lot of love. So much love, he can't contain himself and act responsibly. Yeah, no, you guys don't know what love is on the left, by the way. You guys are the ones that celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination. You said his speech was violence, and then you celebrated an actual act of violence. So don't give me this crap about you guys being for love. Yeah, you love each other, and you love communism, and you love your leftist crap, but you didn't love Charlie Kirk. You don't love me. You don't love the country. Your entire ideology is built on hatred and destroying it. You don't know what love is. And I might get intense and I might get passionate, but I love this country. And frankly, it is from love that I do this show. It's from love that I go out and speak. I'm speaking at another Republican event tomorrow. It's from love that I want to shower my children with wholesome content. It's love, David Hogue, that I even have for you. And disagreement. It's why I want to talk. I want to debate. That's the difference. The left doesn't know about love. Give me a break. So here is a clip of Dirty Rat at the Super Bowl.
God bless America. Sea Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Perú, Ecuador, Brasil, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Panamá, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, México, Cuba, República Dominicana, Jamaica, Haití, las Antillas, United States, Canadá, a my motherland, mi patria, Puerto Rico. Seguimos aquí. Ahora sí.
Honestly, you know what? Now that I watched that clip, it feels like our country was just invaded. That's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. And I mean, the ignorance is astounding. So he goes off and lists every Spanish-speaking country in our hemisphere, including dictatorships like Cuba, and then he throws in, United States, Canada, and then he holds up a football that says, "Together we are America." No, together we are not America. Those are sovereign nations. Those aren't American. Okay, can you imagine for a second any other country on this earth, whether it's a soccer game or football, as it would be called in most of those countries. I mean, rugby, anything. Just pick a big event in another country. Imagine somebody coming out and listing off every country in the world, or listing the states in the United States of America and saying, "Together we are France. Together we are Italy." No, we're not together Italy. You're Italy. We're the United States of America. We're not Venezuela. We're not Cuba. And this is the whole problem with the left's outlook. And by the way, I want to explain something to you, and I will make the case. The left right now in the Democrat Party, one and the same, they are a political party whose guiding ideology is anti-white racism. Oh, yes, it's true. It's true. I guess I'll do the Trump weave here, and we'll come back to this subject, but we'll kind of go. That's the theme of the show, holding up a mirror to the left. But listen to this foreign-born Texas Democrat.
I always tell people the day the Latino, African-American, Asian, and other communities realize that they share the same oppressor is the day we start winning. Because we are the majority in this country now. We have the ability to take over this country and to do what is needed for everyone.
Oh, for everyone? You mean these people talk? I mean, look, I reject racism. I reject slavery, which Democrats obviously champion throughout their history. But this guy's talking about white people like they're blacks in the South. Everyone but white people, we're in the majority. And, we can take over now. What, excuse me? You're engaged in a race war against white people. That's what he's saying there. And I'm not going to sit here and stay silent on the subject. Here's the thing with the left and their worldview. You can't be racist. Only whites are racist. That's it. Because in their view of the world, whites are responsible for everything, every sin, which of course is unbelievable. Before the transatlantic slave trade, that would be the slave trade that brought black slaves, who, by the way, were sold by black African kings. They sold their own people. Well, preceding that was the slave trade that was run by Arab countries, Muslim countries that sold blacks to China and elsewhere. Racism is, and this is the thing, it's moral relativism of the left. I reject racism in all its forms. You aggressively adopt racism against white people. And we're not going to sit here and accept it and tolerate it. You should be condemned, and I am condemning that guy right there. It's outrageous. So anyway, so Bad Bunny, back to the Super Bowl halftime show. Cuba, Dominican Republic, whatever. It lists all these countries and says, together we are America. No, we are not America. And that's the problem. You know, and this is the point. It's a basic, you know why Mamdani and the Muslims and the Democrats are all, getting together? Because they want to conquer. And that's what they have in common. I've said this before. People ask me, how can gays be for Palestine when gays are thrown off roofs in Palestine? Well, because they have an overarching objective that momentarily neutralizes the obvious elephant in the room. These guys want you dead, but you're going to align yourself and form an alliance. Now, because you hate the West or you hate Jews. And so you will put that aside and you guys can kill each other later when you're, exterminate the Jews or destroy the West properly. And that's what's happening right now. I've got a clip of Mamdani I want to play here. Listen to this. This is a stunning thing. Now, for Democrats out there, you tell us, and it's not true, but this is the false history that you are fed with your woke indoctrination, separation of church and state, right? Christianity, it's Christian nationalism, right? Ooh, you guys that are Christians that talk about your Christian faith and want to run for office and talk about God, even though that George Washington talked about God and every president talked about God and this country was founded on Christianity by Christians. You can't do that. Separation of church and state. No. You got to bow down to the rainbow flag, the trans flag. But that Christian stuff in the Bible, get that out of the public sphere, baby. You can't have the 10 Commandments in the room. You can't even talk about Christianity, but we can talk about how your daughter or son should be transitioning to some other gender when they're 5 years old. And this is what Christians out there have to understand. Leftism is a religion, and it's a dangerous one. It is not a replacement for Christianity. Now listen to Mamdani here.
The story of the Hijrah reminds us that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a stranger too, who fled Mecca and was welcomed in Medina. Surah An-Nahl 1642 tells us, as for those who immigrated in the cause of Allah after being persecuted, we will surely bless them with a good home in this world. Or as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Islam began as something strange and will go back to being strange. So glad tidings to the strangers.
So the first Muslim mayor of New York City is quick to quote the Quran. What do you think Democrats would say if, I don't know, a Republican were standing there quoting the Bible? And by the way, I support quoting the Bible. But here you have a Muslim that wants Christians to stay out of office and not bring their Christianity, and yet there he is bringing Islam front and center to his politics. And I mean, he's committing a complete fallacy there, and he's a liar, and he knows he's lying. He's a terrible Muslim if that's what he thinks about, the Quran is pro-illegal immigration. Let's house the how many Democrats are housing these illegals in their homes? Huh? What, in Minneapolis and Minnesota, why don't you Democrats who are out there protesting ICE, who are fighting for the rights of illegal criminals who are murderers and rapists and have rap sheets like that to stay in this country, why don't you make a deal with Jacob Fry, the mayor, and you can go and let one of these illegals out of prison and you can house them in your home. Put them in a room with your kids. Put them on your couch. House the stranger. They'll never do it, of course. How many illegals is Mamdani going to house in his home? So anyway, he's citing the Quran for illegal immigration, and he's abusing theology, even his own, in Islam. Islam is not a borderless, pluralistic faith, by the way. It's a system that's built on complete submission, on law and authority. And this is the difference between the Bible and the Quran, by the way. There is no separation of church and state at all in the Quran. It doesn't sanctify defiance of Islamic law, obviously, either. And Islam historically only tolerated other faiths under Islamic supremacy. They were never viewed as equals. There was no freedom of religion. And like I said, Islam is not just spiritual. It is political and it's militaristic. I mean, this is what's amazing to me. From the very beginning, Islam expanded through conquest. That's its entire history. You know, that's where jihad comes from. It is armed struggle and territorial expansion that is condoned in the Quran. But I just think that's wild to see happening in this country. Because as a matter of fact, that Islam is incompatible with Christianity. It's incompatible with the West. It's incompatible with the United States of America. And I'll say it again, obviously you can be a Muslim and live here. But, you know, you're going to have to make concessions with your faith because they do not comport with the United States of America. I want to get into the Olympics here before we close out in a minute. But first, what do 3 billionaires, 4 major banks, and a legendary 72-year-old investor all have in common? They're all making the same shocking prediction. Gold is headed for $10,000 or more. Goldman Sachs has said that gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan has said as high as 25%. And one respected economist believes the U.S. government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. Our friends at American Alternative Assets, they just released a powerful new report, The Surprising Case for $10,000 Gold. Now you can see what some of the wealthiest players are seeing to make their moves for free. It breaks down the hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree, and how smart Americans are protecting their retirement with gold right now. Go to cloutgold.com to download it free or call 855-803-GOLD. That's cloutgold.com or 855-803-GOLD. So, you know, I think back to Barack Obama, America's first Muslim president, right? The Billy Graham of Islam. I know he claimed to be a Christian. My point is nobody was a greater defender and promoter of Islam in this country than Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro. And when he was president, he would go on these American apology tours. And he'd go and diminish the United States of America on the world stage. He was eager to do it, to talk about how bad we are, to attack this country. And no country does this. You realize that even despite America's flaws, and there are flaws because human beings are flawed, and therefore every country is going to have flaws. Despite our flaws, we are still the greatest country in the history of mankind. There is not a country out there that is blameless. There is not a person watching this show or listening to me right now who is blameless and sinless. We are all sinners the same. And we strive to improve. We ask for forgiveness. We try to live up to the standard that Jesus Christ called us to. And yet these people want to pretend that this is the worst country ever. No country has done more for its own citizens and for the world at large than the United States of America. And we should lean into it and be proud of it because we have an amazing history, an amazing, unique story. And we have achieved and accomplished and overcome things in ways that no other nation could or has. And so now you've got these Olympic athletes who are blessed beyond measure for these opportunities. They are Americans. They live in the greatest country ever created. And yet they are uniquely going to the Olympics and trashing America. It's an amazing thing to watch. People who are the most blessed on earth simply because of where they were born. They're just lucky to be born here. That's the thing. All of us, we're just lucky. We're just lucky. We didn't fight in the American Revolution. We didn't fight in the Civil War. Obviously, there's more recent wars. Some wonderful, some not. World War II, a great example of us saving the West. So much to be proud of. So much to be thankful and grateful for. And yet these spoiled little brats that probably listen to Bad Bunny on the ski slopes are not expressing their pride in this country or their gratitude for the opportunities that put them on that stage to begin with. They just go and try and diminish us. Listen to one. Here's this. I don't know who any of these people are, by the way. I could care less. I can tell you this. I am rooting against every one of these people. If you're going to go to the Olympics representing America and trash America, I hope you lose.
It brings up mixed emotions to represent the U.S. right now, I think. It's a little hard. There's obviously a lot going on that I'm not the biggest fan of, and I think a lot of people aren't. If it aligns with my moral values, I feel like I'm representing it. Just because I'm wearing the flag doesn't mean I represent everything that's going on in the U.S. So yeah, I just kind of want to do it for my friends and my family and the people that support me getting here.
So don't go to the Olympics. If you just want to support your friends and family, stay home and go ski in Breckenridge, Colorado with your buddies. Don't go to the Olympics wearing the U.S. flag. Every now and then I like to go to my, comments here because nobody is better at revealing the mental inadequacy of the left and leftists who chime in. So Maggie Early says, this guy sounds like he got shoved in a locker room one too many times in high school. Brilliant, Maggie. Brilliant comment. Please elaborate. I will continue to share your comments and give you more fame than you've experienced in your life. I give an example. It shouldn't matter who the president of the United States is, obviously, or politics you disagree with back home. I would absolutely condemn an athlete going to the Olympics when Barack Obama was president or Joe Biden and trashing the country because of who the president was. It doesn't have a place on the world stage. And at the end of the day, we should be playing for the same team despite our disagreements. And we should be proud of this country because we all live in this country together. And we all are blessed beyond measure. And why is it that the United States of America and our athletes are the only ones going to the Olympics and trashing their country? Let me actually ask another question, or put it this way. They're being goaded by the globalists in the media overseas into answering questions like this. Do you think that the British athletes representing the United Kingdom, for example, Great Britain, do you think that the media is asking them, hey, how do you feel about your Prime Minister Starmer there, or whatever his name is, letting these Pakistanis that have been raping women out on the streets? How do you feel about the invasion by Muslims in your country and these roving gangs that are raping your citizens and daughters? Are you proud of that? They don't ask that question. Why don't they ask that question? Why don't they ask any of these socialist countries that have basically no GDP? Why don't they ask them about their issues back home? Why is it always about, the U.S. has issues back home? The world has issues. Hatred for America. What these athletes should be saying, if they weren't indoctrinated and infected by the cancer that is the woke mind virus, they would put their foot down if they were asked such a question. They would say, well, why don't you ask other people that question? America's the greatest country in the history of the world. Sure, we have problems. Every country has problems. But I'm grateful to be here representing America. I'm here because of America. And I'm excited to compete and represent my country. That's all you have to say. But these people have weak minds. Here's another one.
Yeah, it's been a hard time for the community overall under this administration. It isn't the first time that we've had to come together as a community and try and fight for our human rights. And now, especially, it's not just affecting the queer community, but many other communities. And I think that we are able to support each other in a way that we didn't have to before, and because of that, it's made us a lot stronger. I hope I can use my platform and my voice throughout these games to try and encourage people to stay strong in these hard times.
What is she talking about? Obviously, she's a lesbian. What rights does she not have? Donald Trump has a lot of gay people in his administration. Scott Bessent is gay. Rick Grenell is gay. What is she talking about? This is the point. The left doesn't even live in reality. They have this false worldview that they've been fed from their parents, from the media, from the schools they attended, and they are incapable of looking around them and seeing what's real. She's going over there and she's playing a victim. Oh, I'm here to represent queers and give them a voice. It's an invented problem. You're the most, one of the most, I mean, before the trans community came up, you were the most coddled faux victim class in this entire nation. It's just unbelievable. Express some gratitude. Why don't you respond? You know what? At least I can be gay in America. You know, there are places like Palestine where we get killed. There are places in the Middle East where you can't be gay. Nobody's taking opportunities of you because you're gay. But you see the activism of the left. They have to go out there and view themselves as some superhero in this false narrative they're living, this screenplay they're writing for themselves. They're always fighting this phantom. It doesn't matter that there's no issues with queer people here, not from this administration. They're not being persecuted. They're not being assassinated like Charlie Kirk or Donald Trump. Or, you know, young kids sitting in Catholic Mass being mowed down by a trans lunatic. But she's out there. Well, yeah, I got to represent the queer. We're having such a hard. I mean, boo-hoo. So pathetic. All right, look, that's all we have time for today. I love my family. I love my girls, my two girls. I love my wife. I love you in the audience. I love this country. I love my detractors. I love the people that hate my guts. I want to see everyone succeed. I want to see this country succeed. And it's not going to succeed by embracing the Bad Bunny woke crap at the Super Bowl. That was a display of that which is damaging to this country, that is destroying this country. That's what's responsible for it. And so, yeah, I'm going to sit here behind this mic. I'm going to do my job elsewhere as a publicist in this country, in my state, talking about reality, talking about the truth. And over the next year, I'm going to develop something, my own organization. First time I'm even talking about it because I just realized it's a passion of mine. And I'm going to go and we're going to arm our kids with an ability to debate. We're going to counteract this nonsense this poison that's being spread by people throughout this country on the left that is tearing our country apart. Because the burden's on us. The burden's on us. You know, if you're a Christian, you want to convert somebody, you know, it's not enough to simply be a Christian yourself. You got to show your math. So we got to study these issues. And fortunately, we know what the left says about anything. We know what their falsehoods are. We see what's going on and what's being taught in schools. So we got to be the doctors of democracy, as Rush Limbaugh called himself, right? We got to have a cure. And we also have to understand the underlying disease, the root cause. And so we're going to address those two things. We're going to build out a movement that's going to educate people. And we're going to take back this country one mind at a time. All right, folks. God bless you all. I want to thank you for being here with me on this Monday. I hope you have a great, great week. I'll be back with you hopefully on Wednesday to give you some update. Tomorrow, pray for me. Going to speak to a wonderful group of Republicans in Northern California. And onwards, folks.
In a nation divided, in a time of shadows, and rises a call that echoes through every valley, every church, every heart that still believes in truth. For Christ and Country tells the powerful story of conviction, courage, and unwavering faith in the face of opposition. It is the story of a man who refused to bow. In these pages, you'll witness a modern struggle for truth, a stand not just for one man, but for every American who believes that faith still matters. From author Drew Thomas Allen comes a stirring tribute to courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable hope found in Christ. This is the time. This is the fight. This is the story of a nation worth saving, for Christ and for country.
We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.